I think you're all being let in from the lobby into this fourth instalment of our seminar series for 2024. My name's Christy Spire. I'm the team leader for our nature education team here at Green Adelaide, and I'm sure you've seen me on a few of these before, but if this is your first one, welcome along today, and we're really looking forward to getting ready for Adelaide's first urban greening strategy. I'd like to start by acknowledging country. I just would like to do that in Ghana, Ngadlu Tampanthi, Ngadlu Ghana, Yatanga, Imparenti. We acknowledge that we're meeting on Ghana country today, even though I'm 4 flights above it. And for those of you that are coming from further afield and from other First Nations around Greater Adelaide as well, very welcome, and we're really looking forward to learning from Ghana and them embedding their wisdom in the urban greening strategy and the actions moving forwards. So this, as I said before, is our fourth instalment of our seminar series, and we run these to help share the great work happening right across Adelaide to make it cooler, greener, wilder and more climate resilient. And we know that we all have a part to play in that. So this session is being recorded and will be available on the Green Adelaide YouTube channel, as are all the other ones, so you can follow them up afterwards. So you're invited to ask questions at any time, but actually you all have your mics muted. So you need to put them into the chat, and we'll answer as many of these as we can at the end of the session. And today we are also experimenting with Slido. Everyone, if you would like to take your phones out, or if you're on a computer where you can do 2 things at once, and just look up slido.com, or you can also use the QR code. I'll just get this out the way for everybody. Basically, use the QR code on your screen or type in slido.com into your browser. And then the password to get in for today is just Green Adelaide with a capital G and a capital A. So we'll leave you to hopefully make your way into Slido. Ali will be using it throughout her presentation today, and then we'll look at the answers together at the end and definitely send a summary out to everybody. So introducing today, you may have heard that recent data about Adelaide's tree canopy coverage shows a general overall increase. While this is really positive, we are a long way off achieving 30% tree canopy cover, which is a widely accepted level to achieve multiple health, livability and economic benefits for urban areas. And so today you're all going to be hearing from Alison Collins, our team leader planning at Green Adelaide, about the draft urban greening strategy for metropolitan Adelaide. The strategy aims to scale up urban greening by providing a mechanism for government and non-government partners to achieve more by working together on shared actions. It will also minimise the loss of valued mature trees and help ensure that tree canopy and greening benefits are equally shared across Adelaide. Ali is an urban planner with passion and expertise in creating more livable, greener and water sensitive neighbourhoods. So really excited about this session today. So over to you, Ali. Now I'll stop sharing and let you take the controls.
Thanks everyone for joining today. I'm really looking forward to sharing where we've landed on the urban greening strategy. In terms of what I'm going to cover today is, I guess, why do we actually need one? The 6 priority areas of action that we've landed on, I guess how we're hoping to coordinate action across different sectors for positive outcomes. We've got 3 performance investigation areas to talk through, and of course, really keen to talk about how you can contribute to the draft strategy itself. So to sort of kick us off, urban greening has been a lot of talk about this in recent years, particularly very much within metropolitan Adelaide. There's really been a whole lot of work being done at all levels of government and in the community on this issue. But there's also been a lot of discussion about some of the sort of big wicket issues that are holding us back from achieving more. And we've had a number of different parliamentary inquiries, an expert panel into planning system reform. We've also done a whole lot of engagement as part of developing this strategy. And there seemed to be a bit of a gap in terms at the metropolitan scale, in terms of having a mechanism to really work together to tackle some of these issues, as you can see on the side here, and sort of, I guess, bridge the gaps in terms of some of the things that it might be falling between different jurisdictions. There's been a whole lot of conversation about getting better outcomes from infill development, particularly about big mature trees. I guess the discussion about the benefits of greening for reducing the impacts of climate change, but also how can we actually make sure our climate change doesn't negatively impact our urban forests in terms of some of those impacts. It's not just about cooling and amenity, it's also about biodiversity and building it into our neighbourhoods. And of course, we've got a number of things in terms of water and infrastructure conflicts. So look, that's just a touch, and I'll keep talking about some of those as we go through. To our first Slido question. And with these questions, as we go through, they will really feed into our consultation process as we look to sort of finalise our draft strategy. So the first question is, what do you think is the biggest challenge or opportunity to create a cooler, leafier and more biodiverse Adelaide? So as I mentioned, we've actually been out over the last 2 years doing a number of consultation events and investigations with a whole lot of organisations that are either deliver or interested or influence urban greening. And so we're out now with the draft urban greening strategy for consultation until the 28th of June. But additional to that, we've actually got a supporting discussion paper that really unpacks how the different options that we might take to measure our progress. And I'm going to share those key elements in a moment. Additionally, we've actually commissioned a number of background papers where there's a number of different issues that we wanted to unpack, but we've also connected to existing new work that's recently been prepared. I'm going to touch on the tree canopy, urban heat and urban biodiversity data in a moment, but there's also the Future Trees project about street tree diversity, as well as on reserves for council land. And Dr. Stefan Caddy-Ritalik spoke only last month through this Green Adelaide series about that. So if you're interested, really encourage you to have a look at that project. And we've also got papers about legislation and policy and where there might be opportunities for better urban greening outcomes. And we've also got a scenario planning report as we really try and think through some of the emerging sort of challenges and opportunities coming our way in Adelaide. And the final element, of course, is always how are we actually going to implement this strategy? And that's something we're working on and being informed as part of this public consultation process. So one of the really sort of big pieces of work that we've been coordinating over the last couple of years is actually the recapture of tree canopy and urban heat data in Adelaide. And that's been a really big sort of collaboration and co-investment project between a number of different government agencies, all of the metropolitan Adelaide councils, to really have a sort of a consistent data set and analysis in terms of understanding tree canopy and urban heat. In terms of how we're sitting in Adelaide, we're sitting at 16.7% urban green cover, but as you can see, it actually is quite diverse across the region, ranging from under sort of 10% right up into about 50%, particularly for areas with national parks. If you want to know more about that data, really encourage you to go onto the urban heat and tree mapping viewer. So it's been really pleasing that we've actually had almost a 4% increase since the baseline. Part of the region was captured in 2018 and the other half in 2019. And before that was for 16.5 councils as opposed to 18 in 2022. So for the areas measured twice, it's been about 4%. But that's still well short of a sort of a 30% that's been recommended as a sort of a really good rule of thumb for maximising health, wellbeing, environmental and economic benefits. In terms of some of the land uses, which are on the lower end of positive gain, that's things like commercial gain, which is only, and also residential. In terms of that aerial imagery that you have up on your screen right now, that's probably a really good snapshot of what's going on in our sort of urban neighbourhoods, where you see some real localised losses, which is in red. But of course, we've actually had pretty good growing conditions over the last few years, and there's also been quite a lot of growth, which is you can see in the green. So we've had both losses and gains And obviously it really varies across the region. We've also been looking, of course, at land use and as well as land ownership, which land ownership is what you can see on the screen at the moment. On the left with the pie chart, that's the sort of land total area for land ownership. As you can see, private land, which is mostly residential, is a significant area in our local community. And the pie chart on the right sort of shows the percentage of total canopy that those different land ownership areas provide. And you can see that in terms of local government sort of reserves and other land, it really does provide a lot of sort of canopy for the area that it is. On the flip side, company is 17.17%, but only provides just over 7% of canopy. So, of course, it's just really important to understand the sort of split of land and who we might talk to in terms of getting better greening outcomes. Turning to urban heat, there's lots of different ways to have a look at it. The one at the top is some thermal mapping from the city of Burnside, which has been a really good tool to see. And I think a number of councils do this. We can really see the sort of impact of trees as well as irrigation to sort of cool the environment compared to things like artificial grass and hard asphalt. Down the bottom is the thermal mapping that aerial thermal mapping that was undertaken through that state and local government project in 2022. And again, you can see the real difference between light coloured roofs and canopy, which is the dark blue and light blue, compared to the dark roofs and other sort of hard surfaces. On the right is some new mapping that's come out of the Department for Environment and Water in their recent report card, which was really looking at the distribution of heat islands. And you can see some real difference between, I guess you can really see the Adelaide Hills is a lot cooler, our sort of salt fields to the sort of northwest. And of course, when you look down to the sort of south, you can see that some of the areas of paddock and sort of bare ground is quite hot as well. So there's lots of different ways to look at this, but vegetation itself is really important to sort of cool these environments. The other significant piece of work that we commissioned that's really supported the urban greening strategy is a piece of work called the Blueprint for a Nature Positive Adelaide. This was a piece of work that RMIT did, led by Professor Sarah Beckersey. And this was really unpacking the sort of urban biodiversity data that we have in Adelaide, what biodiversity sensitive design is and sort of opportunities and challenges within the Adelaide context. And we also worked with about 20 reps from council agencies, NGOs and research institutions on a number of case studies across the region, a whole range of existing urban biodiversity projects, and giving them a bit of a bussard lens to look at sort of some opportunities. Anything from, as you can see, a rain garden next to a tennis court, green walls, linear parks, etc. So I really encourage you to have a look at that report, and that's up on our Your Say site for urban greening. So this brings us to the strategy itself. We've got the key elements are our vision, which is a resilient and livable Adelaide for all, cooler, leafier and more biodiverse. And we've got 6 priority areas for action, and I'm going to go through these, but these are really have come out of all of that consultation about where we've got particular gaps and opportunities at the metropolitan scale to get some better greening outcomes. And we've also got 3 performance areas that we're investigating, which is increased tree canopy, tree species diversity and urban heat intensity. And I'm going to go through those as well. So in terms of the strategy, we've got actions that cut across all the different types of ways that you might influence better urban greening outcomes, whether it's research, legislation and policy, education incentives, spatial mapping, and on-ground practical action. And of course, there's many ways within a city that you can focus your urban greening efforts. of course, it's not just about trees, though of course they get a lot of attention as we look to try and fit them into a sort of a denser urban environment. It's all the other types of greenery, whether it's a sort of understory and mid-story, protecting our remnant vegetation, and looking at not just parks and streets, but also looking at vertical spaces, looking along our green and blue corridors and private greening. In terms of the strategy scope, there's obviously a lot of good work done by many different organisations in terms of their own individual urban greening strategies. But this metropolitan strategy is really trying to look at actions that unlock metropolitan-wide benefit. But really, we're trying to focus also on where we've got known gaps or scale up what is already working well and which harness cross-sector collaboration and co-investment. So in terms of the first priority area, this is a cooler and greener infill development. This is probably the one where we've probably received the most feedback, and in particular strengthening tree protection legislation. And I'm really pleased that it's only last week that the Minister for Planning released new sort of updates in terms of the significant and legislated trees in terms of strengthening the sort of provisions about them. So that's a really good start, and that's coming off the back of a huge amount of work and also, I guess, advocacy by many groups about wanting to see that to better protect mature trees in our existing areas. The other thing where we'll have a focus is actually tools and other capacity building measures to make exceeding minimum standards easy and attractive. So in Adelaide, we do have a one tree planting policy for new development within existing infill zones, but there has been a real, I guess, focus on, how do we actually make that easy and also encourage people to do more than that. Of course, in a cost of living sort of crisis that we've got going on right now, it's really important to think about ways where we can make things cost effective and also incentivise positive action. And also another example, it's not just residential infill, it's also other types of development within an infill environment. Commercial car parks are really an area where we're hoping to see some better outcomes. This is an example from Fig Tree Plaza in Adelaide Oval, which, as well as putting in trees and sort of grasses, it actually put that together with water-sensitive urban design and actually really saw some real significant tree growth over just a 2-year period. If you want to know more about that case study, I encourage you to go to Water Sensitive SA's website and have a look. The second one is government leading by example. And there's been a whole lot of feedback about what state government can do with its own land, whether it's transport corridors, major land releases, building or renovating schools, upgrading hospitals and other health facilities and other government land. It's also about finding practical solutions to challenges such as infrastructure conflicts. There's been a whole lot of conversation in Adelaide about how to better manage trees and overhead power lines, as well as underground infrastructure as well. Maintenance also continues to be something where we're hoping to see some better outcomes. And the final thing is about recognising the true value of trees in government systems and policy. Just a quick example here, the Department for Infrastructure and Transport has a green infrastructure commitment, so we'll be working with DIT in terms of implementing that sort of framework, and yeah, really encourage you to have a look at that commitment, which is up on their website. In terms of priority area 3, this is one that's very much focused about building nature back into our urban areas. But it's also about identifying and protecting areas of valued native vegetation. We definitely have gaps or areas of improvement in terms of understanding where our remnant vegetation is and also better protecting our sort of critical habitat. I'm also in a moment going to give you just a couple of examples about legislation and policy, as well as what biodiversity sensitive urban design is and how we hope to encourage it. Firstly, biodiversity sensitive urban design, or BUSD, is one of Green Adelaide's legislated priorities. As I mentioned earlier, we've done a piece of work just recently with RMIT, who coined this term. But in terms of what it is, biodiversity sensitive design is a process which is about, as well as looking at urban greening and other sort of development aspects, is really trying to make sure that the vegetation and other aspects of the development support sort of positive wildlife outcomes. So it's about being really sort of mindful about exactly what you're trying to target. And this, as you can see up on the screen, this is a sort of a streetscape example from some guidelines that RMIT have, and which address the sort of 5 WUSD principles. The first one is addressing threats, and that might be anything from containing cats to wildlife-friendly lighting, promoting ecological connectivity, that might be connected vegetation if that suits the animals or birds that you're supporting. There's also positive human-nature interactions, and that might be cues to care in terms of signage or citizen science programs, enhancing habitat and resources. And the Nature Positive report that we got online has lots of examples of how particular animals or birds are targeted and what sort of resources that were required to do that, and also facilitating ecological processes. If you want to know more about biodiversity sensitive design, I really encourage you either to look at Green Adelaide's website or go to RMIT's Icon Science website there as well. Another thing to learn from is the experience of the UK government at the moment, who have recently released legislation about biodiversity net gain legislation for new development, which is a really exciting prospect in terms of not only protecting or adding, but actually seeking to have net gain biodiversity. So we don't obviously have that in Adelaide, but these sort of inspirational examples are things that will be important to have a look at. Priority area 4 is future-proofing our urban forest. This is very much looking at how we respond to the challenges of climate change, and also ensuring that we've got adequate water to ensure sort of healthy and thriving growth. So this one is really very much about knowledge and research. There's a whole lot of gaps in terms of our understanding and also availability of sort of climate resilient plant species, and also understanding how to make sure it's resilient and healthy. But there's been, of course, some early work done with the stage 1 sort of Future Trees project that Adelaide University has done. So as mentioned before, I encourage you to have a look at that. And just finally, water sensitive design is a concept that's been around for quite some time, but it'd be great to help ensure that it sort of becomes business as usual. Just a quick example, we've got a plant selector online tool, which is with the Botanic Gardens of South Australia. There's a real opportunity to update that with a sort of a climate resilient lens, and also improve the usability of its interface. Priority area 5 is about improving greening equity. Obviously, we've got lots of areas of Adelaide that have great urban greening outcomes already, but how do we make sure that that's much more widely available? So in terms of this one, I'm going to go through just a couple of examples about the prioritisation tool, proposal, plantable, understanding where we've got opportunities to plant more vegetation across metropolitan Adelaide, as well as undertaking region level open space planning. So the first one is looking at the opportunity to do a spatial prioritisation tool to identify areas for urban greening investment. The Department for Environment and Water and Green Adelaide have done some early work in this area in terms of a pilot, looking at the variables on the left there in terms of overlaying canopy cover, green cover, impermeable surfaces, urban heat hotspots, vulnerable age group data, so under 5s and over 65s, and social economic disadvantage. And through that, we have actually, if you look at the three circles, well, not the three circles, the two circles on the right, once you overlay that data, it starts to give you an indication of where we might have very high priority down to very low priority, I guess, investment priorities. So as you can see here, this is down to 50 by 50 sort of grids, and most neighbourhoods would have sort of a variety. You can see probably where there's a particular oval or there's a sort of a river system. But this is something that might lend itself to being a criteria, whether it's in a funding program for grants or whether an individual landowner, such as a council or perhaps the transport department, or maybe even a school, is thinking about where they might want to plant. So this is a piece of work that hasn't happened yet, but it might be something that we investigate further if there's interest. Another piece of work that's recently commenced is the development of an open space strategy for Greater Adelaide. And this piece of work is a sort of a background piece as part of developing the Greater Adelaide Regional Plan, the GARP, which is underway at the moment, and that's been undertaken by the State Planning Commission. The final priority is scaling up impact by working together. And this is its own priority because this is the make or break of whether a strategy is implemented or not. So we'll be looking at designing a cross-sector collaboration process and implementation plan. Of course, working with Kayak to identify opportunities for partnerships with Ghana. And thirdly, focused on a joint research pipeline to fill knowledge gaps. And I'm really pleased to say that we will be having a new sort of urban greening lead position starting at Green Adelaide in the coming financial year that will help sort of our work in this area, and we'll be developing an implementation plan. And how this lands is going to be really informed by this consultation work underway at the moment. Okay, so this brings us to our second Slido question. So based on all of that, what do you think are the top 3 collaborative actions needed to help Adelaide become cooler, leafier and more biodiverse? While you're having a think about that, I'll keep going on the next aspect of the presentation today, and that is how we propose to measure our progress towards a leafier, cooler and more biodiverse Adelaide. So we've got a standalone discussion paper, as I mentioned, which is available at your say, and I really encourage you to have a look. But in a nutshell, we're proposing 3 sort of performance investigation areas. We've got increased tree canopy, reduced urban heat, and greater tree species diversity. We do already have a target for increased tree canopy in Adelaide at the moment, but urban heat and tree species diversity are new in Adelaide in terms of having a performance indicator or target, hence why we've got our standalone discussion paper to really unpack it in detail. The other new thing that we're proposing for Adelaide is having a report card which includes ranges for very good, fair and low, and or continuing to have a target or for tree canopy and introduce one for urban heat and tree species diversity. So in terms of just sharing what that looks like, I'll just go through the tree canopy one because that's probably the area that more people are familiar with and actually easier to explain than the other two without going through all the detail. So in terms of option 1, in terms of the report card, we're proposing that we would have 4 different categories for the report card. Very good being under 30% tree canopy cover, good 20 to 30%, fair 10 to 20%, and low under 10%. This is all using LiDAR analysis and looking at the proportion of canopy cover, which is 3 metres or taller. And it's obviously, we have the capacity through LiDAR to look at it or cut it in different ways. So if you looked at the Metropolitan Adelaide region, which at the moment is sort of the 18 sort of council areas, that's fair at the moment with 16.7%. Or if you want to look a little bit more fine-grained, you could look at suburbs in terms of, and we've got a range from very good down to low. Or you could also look at land use or land ownership. And I've just got a few examples there as well. So there's, depending on where you're interested in or what you might have an opportunity to influence, there's different things that you can look at. So at the moment, as I mentioned, we've got an existing target in the 30-year plan for Greater Adelaide, which is under review as part of the new Greater Adelaide Regional Plan. And that, when it was introduced in 2017, was a 20% in urban green cover in metropolitan Adelaide. And so we've actually met that over 5 years as opposed to the 30 years. So of course, that's why it's important to review things every 5 years, because sometimes you move faster or slower or different than you envisioned at the time. So as part of the fact we've, I guess, performed better than we thought, but also we have a new methodology that allows us to do more things. We're proposing, firstly, one option could be to increase canopy cover by 20% by 2029, which is just 5 years. We could continue to do it at using local government areas at baseline, or we could actually also use specific land use types where we might want to focus our efforts. Another option is to have a canopy cover target, which is about increasing to 30% across defined residential zones. So this is really looking at where canopy cover might be most needed, where people live, and also not having a sort of a canopy cover for areas where you might not want it. So, for example, if you just have it for local government areas, it does capture things like airports and agricultural land or ovals where you might, of course, might not want more trees. The final one is every citizen should be able to see at least 3 trees from their home. Now, this is one that has been put forward. I've forgotten the name of the organisation, but it's something that resonates with a lot of people in terms of canopy cover can seem a bit hard to imagine, but if you imagine 3 trees, and of course it's got quite a residential focus in terms of that, which is important for sort of livability and sort of health or wellbeing. So anyway, so they're the options that we have out for consultation, and of course are interested in any other ideas that people might have. So I guess I'm encouraging, as we can move through this consultation process, we're really encouraging people that are interested in getting involved with the urban greening strategy to come and work with us on it. And I guess that brings us to our final Slido question, which is, what role could you or your organisation play in helping meet the vision of a cooler, leafier and more biodiverse Adelaide? To give you a bit of thinking time for that, I'm just running through some sort of before and after sort of imagery as we hope Adelaide will transform through this work, through some of the sort of key areas that are a particular focus of the urban greening strategy. So this is sort of your thinking time here. And my final slide is just to direct your attention to, we've got your site for urban greening strategy, and there you'll find our strategy, the discussion paper that I just mentioned, a family of background papers. We've got a survey online and also encourage submissions as well. And of course, you're welcome to get in touch if you're interested in talking further. And that sort of brings me to the end of the sort of formal presentation. But yeah, I'd love to answer any questions if anyone has any.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ali. There are not any questions in the chat yet, but some good comments and feedback coming through, and lots coming through Slido as well. So we'll give everyone, a little bit more time to pop those in, and I will share those. So yeah, Harry's very happy about remnant vegetation being protected. It will make the bats happy, and Jenny Garden Edge already have a great tool that we've developed and have been applying for government clients across Australia for a number of years. It does exactly this prioritisation modelling that you were talking about. So she's willing to be discussed. The organisation is the Nature-Based Solutions Institute, who posited the 330-300 rule for urban equity. So yeah, thanks for that. Contact Jenny. And yeah, lots of hellos coming through. So yeah, if you do have any specific questions for Alison while she's on the line, please pop them in the chat box. Ali, if you just want to stop sharing your screen, and then I'll share the Slidos, which I think a lot of people, we left them open so that you could see each other's answers as well. Yeah, so there's definitely lots coming through there. So as Ali said before, this will all form part of the consultation and go into all of the amazing information that is being captured over, well, when do you finish off? The 28th of June, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
For the closing date with that. So I'll just go back to the first question. So people are still typing in, as you can see there. Can you see that, Ali? Just checking that that's come through. Yeah. So so that first question there, and I actually like that Slido have summarised a few things at the top in terms of the challenges like trees, infill. They're just picking up some wording there, but developers obviously comes up quite strongly. Government opportunities. So yeah, lots of good opportunities as well as challenges, the small blocks. And the opportunities around train lines, verges and unappreciated areas. And then this challenge, which we talk about a lot, turning the strategy into outcomes. We've seen lots of excellent strategies in governance, but how we see tangible outcomes. And I think everyone that's online today and working on this is very passionate about that as well. So let's see how we can do that. Yeah, community support for retention of large trees. Yeah, the challenge of convincing asset owners of the importance of maintaining landscaping. Yeah, some of the cultural phenomenon around people not necessarily wanting trees, policy, legislation, structuring greening to be joined up and appropriate for full biodiversity benefits. Fantastic. Yeah, so yeah, lots and lots of responses there to unpack. And then the second question was, what were the top 3 collaborative actions needed to help Adelaide to become cooler, leafier and more biodiverse? I think some people have put in, these might be the organisations. But yeah, climate collaboration, education, fantastic. Funding for tree root barriers and pruning. So some incentives for householders. Collaboration with smaller developers of land division.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Statewide data gathering, state government bodies committing to greening, yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
We talked about that on Friday's workshop, yeah, sharing the obligation. Yeah, a challenge from, one of our Ghana elders.
I like the one about car parks. That's, yeah, there's definitely an opportunity. I reckon that's
car parking, have Worcester trees, yeah.
A key spot, definitely. Well, I saw there was a few questions that came through, Chris.
Yes, I'll jump. Sorry, but when I share my screen, it's harder to see the questions. Let me just do this back again. So I'll just stop sharing the Slido for now, because I think everybody can actually see those questions and answers. So yeah, if you've popped anything on there, yeah, please have a look at everybody else's as well.
I left my phone at home.
Yes. Except for Ali.
That's okay. I can look at it later.
I think you've probably seen them all, but yeah, it's yeah, always fantastic to to learn from other people's thinking.
Yeah.
What does great questions here. Okay. I might start with Steve's. What does more diverse vegetation mean? More local species for local critters and less jacarandas, etc., etc. No more exotics, please. Yeah, that's that challenge. Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I guess you're right. It's definitely at the moment just looking at what's coming out of the Future Trees project, where they really drilled down into what have we got in terms of tree species diversity on streets and reserves? And they did find that there is sort of monocultures in different areas. So we are looking at more diversity. And some of that's towards having more resilience to pests and climate change. But it's also about making sure we've got the right mix to support more birds and animals. And yes, natives are always really good, and endemic ones, but of course, urban environments are very novel habitats. So it's not about only having natives, but I guess being mindful about what are you trying to get in terms of your outcomes. But it's having that debate. It's been a really interesting conversation. About what we might be able to achieve. But we don't really know in other land uses. Like councils have obviously looked at it for their land, and now it's stitched together into a consolidated database for the first time. But we don't actually know on state government land or private land. So that's something we'll be looking at. We only really know trees over 3 metres at the moment.
I have not heard of this before, but the increase of dog urine has a major negative effect on tree roots. Any thoughts on managing that? And someone has joined into that. We've lost plants at the Torrens, almost certainly due to dog urine. This could be a good public information message. So,
wow, you know what? That is the most unique question I've ever been asked. So that's great.
Some plants seem more resilient to dog urine too, and how to best protect plants that are sensitive would be helpful. Yeah.
I will say I used to really been interested in verge gardening and stuff like that, but since I've had a dog over the last 2 years, I've never looked at verges the same, probably. So I don't know if that's helpful, but yeah, that's a really interesting perspective, and that definitely hasn't come up before. It's something to think about. So thank you.
Yeah. And we do have all those interactions between animals and people and plants in the urban space as well. So you're always going to get some new challenge. That's for sure. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. So a question from Samantha. Will this strategy provide any funding or resource boosts? Is her first one. Do you want to just?
Well, I mean, it depends on the projects. So
yes.
What we are hoping to do is provide a mechanism to get more new projects up. So depending what they are, of course, you go for different fundings, whether it's through state government, but what we're hoping, obviously, the urban heat and tree canopy recapture was a good example of multiple agencies and local government all putting in small bits of money, stitching it together and getting something off the ground that was helpful to everyone. So I guess we're hoping to see a bit more of that being easier to achieve.
And this is a great question, and it has been discussed on some of the workshops that I've been to in the lead up. Is it appropriate to have trees everywhere? Some sections of the strategy concern me in relation to trees in the wrong areas and that understanding. So I think that's a good one to raise.
You're really right. So it's not just about more trees everywhere. It's also the quality aspects, and that's why you see a real big stream about biodiversity. But say in some of the foothills, some of it's about taking out woody weeds and things like that, which may reduce the canopy a bit, but might lead to better outcomes. So I guess it's about getting the right trees where they're most needed. And of course, some areas of things, the focus might be on grasslands or other types of vegetation. Or of course, if you're a playing field or if you're an airport or it really depends on the context of what you're trying to achieve. So, I hope it's not coming through that we're thinking about having trees everywhere. But of course, a lot of the conversation does go to trees because in an urban environment, they're getting harder and harder to fit in. Therefore, that's why you hear a lot of conversation about that.
Yeah, definitely. There's another one here, Ali, around the prioritisation tool, just around timelines for this, as it would be good to progress so that we can feed into and inform the GARP and the open space strategy as well. Timing is important, isn't it? Trying to link all of these different strategies.
That's right. And look, it's been done as a pilot, using the sort of data that we had from the previous ABS in terms of 2016 and the previous urban heat and tree canopy. So it's about rerunning it. But of course, the conversation needs to be had about how different organisations would use it, because I think people would use it in different ways, depending whether they wanted to use it to inform their individual decision making about where their priorities might be, or what else they might want to do it. So I think that's the bit. And also there's probably some additional things that we might want to add to it, like biodiversity data, or comparing it to where active transport corridors are, or other trip generators, things like that. So yeah, there's a lot of interest in that, and yeah, it'll be good to look at that further.
Right, great. And is there a plan for, this is from Harry, is there a plan for ongoing wildlife monitoring following the re-veg that happens as part of this plan to see which native animals have moved back into the green spaces, etc.? Is that's part of the, you know, the BUSIT is the designing up front, but then the monitoring as things progress?
That was really interesting. So as part of that piece of work with RMIT, we looked across 16 case studies, and sort of monitoring and target setting was one of the biggest challenges. Like, how do you actually have the right data to know what you're trying to encourage back into the local landscape in terms of birds or animals, but also measuring how you were going. So that is definitely where some work needs to be done, and we're looking into that further. So yeah, that's important, but there's a lot of work to be done in that space.
Excellent. Yeah, so sure, I'm sure we'll involve you somehow, Harry, definitely. All your fantastic work with the bats in particular.
Yeah.
I'm just jumping back in. I think we've covered most of the questions. If you do have any more, I'm just going back into the Slido for that last question around what role could you or your organisation play to help meet the vision. And I might just share a few. I might not share my screen, but yeah, these are encouraging. You know, as landscape architects, we're at the forefront of designing public open spaces and in a strong position to be advocating for green, cool and biodiverse spaces to our clients. I think, yeah, such an important group of strategic and practitioners. It's important we keep abreast of these issues and specify the right species for the right location. Yeah, fantastic. That's really great. Sorry, I'm just aware someone else has just jumped in with a question. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, this is a great question. Right up my alley. There is very little understanding in the community about what biodiversity means, the human impact upon it, what climate change means for biodiversity. The urban greening strategy is likely to flounder without more education. Yeah, and an education plan. So yeah,
Well,
really key component of it. Yeah.
yeah, look, absolutely. And so probably so while we've been doing the strategy at Green Adelaide, we've also been thinking about those sort of no regrets things that are sort of immediate priorities. And one of them is a biodiversity sensitive urban design capacity building program, and that would be a key component of that. Obviously, WUSIT's been around for quite a few years. It's a fairly well understood concept, but WUSIT is sort of new. Like, you know, what data do we have? What does success look like? How would you do it? How would you source the right plants? All those steps along the way. So that's an immediate sort of priority that we're sort of scoping up at the moment.
Yeah, fantastic. Awesome. Yeah, and it's just great to see all the different ways that people are, putting forward themselves and their organisations to play a role in advocating for the inclusion of the GA strategy requirements into design standards for public realm projects, plant more trees with hindmarsh greening, influencing planning and infrastructure projects, plant, and then, yeah, some great personal examples as well, you know, plant higher tree canopies in my small garden, continue to educate people about sustainability, biodiversity, climate change. Councils obviously already contributing awesome tree planting on their own land. So that's fantastic.
No, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, the Q&A chat. Oh, thank you very much for that heads up, team. that other people have been putting. There's another little function in Teams that people have been using with some questions. So sorry that I didn't get to these earlier, team. Thank you. Oh, interesting. A water question. How are we planning to irrigate all of these new green assets, particularly into the water scarce future? Yeah, that's a great challenge.
Yeah, that's definitely something we're thinking about at the moment. Obviously, we've almost had like a little mini drought at the moment in terms of, I don't know how many days it's been without rain for this time of year. So there is obviously, you'll see a real component in terms of water sensitive design, in terms of better utilising water as it falls. The state government is also doing their resilient water futures strategy, which I reckon will be out pretty soon. But there is an action in the urban greening strategy about like modelling the sorts of water requirements that we might need. It's a bit of a curly question because obviously it depends on what you're planning, depends on where it is in terms of how much built environment's around it. So we've got a bit of a data gap at the moment. So it's definitely a sort of a key action. I think there might be some work being done at the moment by Adelaide University engineering master students. They might be in their early stages. So yeah, it's coming up as a really important one to really unpack.
Definitely. Another great question around the use of cool road surfaces and if that's going to be rolled out, or is that part of this strategy?
Yeah, I mean, cool. It's really important to obviously cool the environment. You would have seen in that thermal imagery, it was that real sort of dark blue. It's really important. This strategy is really focused on the vegetation aspect rather than the built environment. But I know that a lot of councils are doing some really good work in that area and probably the Transport Department as well.
Yeah, definitely. Good question from Amanda. Is there any access to the raw data from the Urban Tree Canopy Viewer so that it can be used on individual projects? I'm assuming that's kind of from someone that wants to take it right down to the granular level. I mean, I believe online it does go quite granular, but you might have more to add.
So that would be probably if they share their details. One of our analysts here at Green Adelaide or DEW could reach out and discuss that. And find out how we might be able to help there.
Right. Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Amanda. Do get in touch. And yeah, a super practical one, which I think is a great question as well. How do we select appropriate trees that provide cooling but also resilient to increasing temperatures and less rainfall? So that kind of plant selector, tree selector type of tool. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a sort of a stage 2 that Adelaide University hopes to do as part of their Future Trees project. Because it's actually obviously quite complicated to do climate modelling. There's a whole lot of things to think about and variables depending on where you plant things. So I know that there is an action in the strategy about doing sort of trials to really understand more in that area. So yeah, because it's a really important one.
Yeah. And yeah, back to the spatial prioritisation tool, that is that being used in the GARP preparation? I mean, it could be, basically, is what you were talking about before. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, the State Planning Commission and the Planning Department, this is a whole of government document. So even though Green Adelaide's coordinated it, we're coordinating on behalf of all the different government agencies. So yeah, they're welcome to consider. And of course, we talk to them, and we hope the outcomes of reviewing the 30-year plan urban green cover target will also feed into their considerations as well for GARP. So and same with the resilient water future strategy. So there's lots of sharing of information and thinking about how it all kind of works together.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think these last two questions by Glenn, raised some really interesting challenges around, who pays for work and maintains it. In your before and after images, why is the majority of greening being pushed to council land, like verges and medians? And if this is a plan, who pays for the work to be undertaken and who maintains it? Even though I think in the pie chart there, you did indicate that there's actually a huge proportion that is not council land. Council land is only a small portion. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Look, they're just some sort of visual. I'd say, I mean, obviously, commercial car parks is something that is usually private land, and obviously, residential example was in there. But of course, there's lots of areas of sort of urban environment, and some areas need more than others. So, and I know the Transport Department, through their green infrastructure commitment, are really looking into different ways that they can green things, as well as other government agencies and their land. So yeah, I guess it's about everyone sort of looking at what they can do, and definitely not just about what local government's doing. So as you can see, they've been doing great work, and
Yes.
and through all of their urban greening strategies, and so but we hope to keep working with them on how we can work together on that.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, obviously it's so it's an ongoing, tension between the two, and for state government to lead the way, and local government working together. It takes both levels. Awesome. One more comment on here is that we really like Charles Sturt Council's Verges Alive program to help out with growing
Yes,
cheap, low-growing natives. Yeah, there's some fantastic initiatives
example
by local governments all across Adelaide that are really supporting people on private land, and that it seems like there's more coming your way. So thank you, everybody. I think I got through to all those Q&As that people were putting into the other column that I didn't see there in the end. But if we didn't get to your question today, we will take it on board and feed some more answers back to you, and some links. And Nat does a great job of pulling together an email of all the different things that you can keep discovering and learning after these sessions, because we don't get to everything and we like to finish right on 5, which it is now. So thank you so much to Ali for pulling this together and presenting this. We've had over 100 people online tonight, which is just awesome engagement. And thank you. Everything that's inputted into the Slido will be put into the engagement process as well. But we do really encourage you to put in formal submissions through Your Say, to get involved in any other workshops that you've been invited to, and any other opportunities. So keep talking to your broad networks about this strategy. So yes, we'll be in contact with an email. Our next session in this series is a very exciting one on climate justice with South Australia's Young Australian of the Year, Tiani Adamson, on Tuesday, the 25th of June. So if you have registered for this one, you will automatically get invites to the next ones until you decline them. So we'll send you more information on this session, and you can register with us again, and we'll be in contact. So yeah, we hope you can join us for the next one. And thank you so much for joining us this evening. See you next time.
Thanks.